Good evening, classmates, Professor Lisa Tafoya. My name is Brandon Garrison, and I am here to give you my oral presentation on the death penalty and its link to racial discrimination within the criminal justice system. Recently, a report was released by the DPIC, the Death Penalty Information Center, in this year in September of 2020. The report was released in the article titled Enduring Injustice, the Persistence of Racial Discrimination in the United States Death Penalty. In this report, it places the death penalty in historical context as a descendant of slavery, lynching, and segregation. As social movements pressures policymakers to readdress injustices in the criminal legal system and to institute reforms to make the process more fair and equitable, the Death Penalty Information Center released this report, once again titled Enduring Injustice, the Persistence of Racial Discrimination in the United States Death Penalty. The report gives in-depth evidence of the historical role that race has played in the death penalty. It details the pervasive role of racial discrimination playing out in the administration of capital punishment. The death penalty is something that must be discussed whenever there are discussions of police reform, prosecutorial accountability, reversing mass incarceration, and the criminal justice system as a whole. In this recent report, it details racial disparities that are present at every stage of a capital case and get magnified as a case moves through the legal process. The report also documents the historical role of the United States death penalty as an instrument of social control. During slavery, the death penalty was used as a tool of controlling Black populations and curbing rebellions. Legal executions were promised by public officials as lynchings were being discouraged. Around the end of the 20th century, or the early 20th century, lynchings began to decrease, but there was a rise in public executions that began to take place. These public executions were pretty much used as a form of controlling the Black population and as a cry out from the white public who were encouraging the deaths of many Black men who were accused of raping white women or girls, who were alleged to have raped white women or girls. And with that being said, the executions began to take place in the early 20th century, while lynchings had decreased but were still going on. All across the South, African American men were condemned and executed for alleged rapes of white women and girls, while white men were never charged or executed or even brought to justice for the rape of Black women or Black girls. This report that I'm sharing with you all today, it gives the evidence of racial bias that exists in cases where white victims were more likely to be investigated and capitally charged. Systematic exclusion of jurors of color from service in death penalty trials, and disproportionate imposition of death sentences against defendants of color. The report provides compelling evidence of racial bias in the modern death penalty, including a 2015 meta-analysis of 30 studies showed that the killers of white people were more likely than killers of Black people to face a capital prosecution. It also gives us a study done in North Carolina which showed that qualified Black jurors were struck from juries at more than twice the rate of qualified white jurors. As of 2020, as of 2010, 20% of those on the state's death row were sentenced to death by all white juries. Since executions resumed in 1977, 295 African American defendants have been executed for the murder of a white victim, while only 21 white defendants have been executed for the murder of an African American victim. Also, a 2014 mock jury study of more than 500 Californians found that white jurors were more likely to sentence poor Latino defendants to death than poor white defendants. Executions of African Americans for murder convictions are 22% more likely to be linked to 22% more likely to be linked to police misconduct. The report also gives examples of pending death penalty cases where racial discrimination played a role in driving death sentences for Black defendants. I would like to give one or two examples of the cases that this report indicates of racial discrimination within the case involving the death penalty. One case in particular that I want to share with you is the case of Abu Ali Abdur Rahman, a man in Tennessee who in 2019, the Davidson County District Attorney General, Glenn Funk, conceded that Abu Rahman's trial had been infected by overt racial bias. Rahman had long argued that the prosecutor struck down two potential Black jurors based on racial stereotypes. The trial court agreed to a reduced sentence, but the Tennessee Attorney General's office is currently appealing. Another case that I would like to share with you today, or share with you out of this report, is the case of Julius Jones out of Oklahoma. Julius Jones, who has a strong innocence claim, was convicted and sentenced to death by a nearly all-white jury for killing a white businessman. His case was riddled with racial discrimination, including an officer using a racial slur during the arrest, prosecutors striking every Black potential juror but one, and a juror who used the N-word to describe Jones. His petition for clemency is currently pending. This recent information that I read and that I'm sharing with you all today is information that gives detail and that gives evidence of capital punishment in the United States of America being directly linked to the racial discrimination and the past history of segregation and Jim Crow in this country. This is a topic that many of us discuss, that some of us discuss, and many of us try to avoid, because the death penalty is not something that many people like to talk about. Many people avoid talking about the death penalty for their own personal reasons, or they avoid the conversation. But I am glad today that I was able to share this information with you about the death penalty and to give you all insight of how the death penalty is linked to the racial injustices that exist in this country. And before I end today, I would just like to say that I would like to learn more about this issue myself, and that I would like to carry on as far as learning more about criminal justice in this country and understanding the past. I hope that you all enjoyed this information that I shared with you today. And I hope that down the line, I can really be of good use, and I can really help those who are going through the criminal justice system and those who are experiencing their own injustices within the criminal justice system. Thank you for your time today, and I hope to hear from you soon. God bless. Yeah.